Alright. Hello, I'm your Edgy English teacher, and welcome to episode 2 of my video blog. The title of today's episode is How I Became a Teacher, Illusions and Reality. So, a little bit about me. I started teaching in 2001. And this was just about, actually 2 days before the World Trade Center, imploded. Actually, I think it was 3 days, brand new teacher. So anyway, I originally studied journalism at Brooklyn College, to be exact, and I wanted to, have these grand ambitions of being a journalist and working for the New York Times. And I remember going on several, interviews to be a journalist. I was a member of the NABJ, National Association of Black Journalists. And I always wanted to be a journalist, a writer. So that wasn't working out. In fact, I even interned at the Village Voice, wrote an article, and so that wasn't working out. So I just had my son, and the jobs I was getting as a journalist were mostly out of state. So I didn't want to leave my son. So hey, someone told me about teaching. According to my friend, it was so easy to be a teacher. All he needed was a heartbeat, And so I had ideas of, saving the world, saving all the black kids in need, that kind of illusionary thinking. So anyway, that summer of 2001, after graduation, I spent, going through schools in Brooklyn, looking for a teaching gig here and there. And I finally found a school. After several interviews, they accepted me, and I was in the classroom. So today what I really want to talk about is the illusions and the reality of being a teacher, right? So basically 3 illusions, and the reality behind that, right? So illusion number 1, are you ready? Yeah. Illusion number 1, excuse me. So my first illusion, was that, students were reading. That's my cat. It's having a fit. Hi, catty. Yeah. So anyway, this illusion I had was that students were ready, willing, and able in terms of their reading ability and ability to write in the English classroom. By the way, I'm an English teacher. So, I had this idea of me, sitting at a wooden desk and, drinking a cup of hot chocolate or tea, and my 30 students would be sitting ambitiously reading or writing a 5-page essay. I had these grand illusions, of my tweed jacket and my nice tie and, my briefcase and, all these well-disciplined students. Well, the reality is that I discovered this after about a year, or not even a year, in my first years, that a lot of my students were inefficient, unsophisticated readers, right? So what does that mean? Many of them, most of them rather, can read it, but they don't get it. So they're reading, but there's not a deep comprehension. which was a shock to me. I assumed everybody could read and everybody understood. So another issue around that was pronunciation of words, right? Or definition of words, right? So they had very limited vocabulary, right? So that was another issue that shocked me, right? So I had to, take a detour into teaching kids how to read. But the question always bothered me, or almost lingered in the back of my mind. How did you make it to high school, right? And you didn't learn to read. Whose fault was that? Was that the parents, the student, or the school system? You tell me. So moving on, my second illusion I had as a new teacher was you were the authority in the class. In other words, you, the teacher, was the authority in the classroom. So, I came from the Caribbean where, corporal punishment was the norm, right? If a student or a child misbehaved, you had the authority to, use corporal punishment, among other means or methods. But that was a strong option. So I walked into this classroom, and kids were talking while I was talking, and this was new to me, right? And so what do I do? What are my recourses? You tell them be quiet, you move their seats, you call home, you refer them to the dean before you get anything done. So a kid was allowed to disrupt your class for the whole day, and you had to bear with that. You couldn't necessarily have them removed from the class. And so I found all this very cumbersome, almost like intentionally designed to create an environment of chaos, right? Where kids ruled as opposed to the teacher as the authority figure. So that was quite problematic for me, right? And so I started to thinking that, which brings me to my third point. Well, how is this school supposed to function if the teachers, the adults, didn't have the authority over the kids, right? So I started to form these ideas in my mind that maybe school wasn't really designed to succeed. It was actually maybe designed to fail. Which brings me to my third point, which is that schools were designed not for education, but for mediocrity. The illusion was that school was for education, but the reality was mostly, and I know I'm going to get feedback or pushback for this, it's mostly a holding center for teenagers, right? I think it was Carter G. Woodson who wrote The Miseducation of the Negro. And I think if we look, to be honest, at schools today, I've been teaching for 3 years. Yes, there's good in there. Yes, you can teach, but there's also a lot of miseducation, right? Misachievement, right? So, a couple of things I started to notice also was that the strict structure of lesson plans, the lack of flexibility and creativity in being an English teacher, this idea that you must have this lesson plan, it must have an aim, it must have a do now, all these bells and whistles, while they do have their place, I found it quite limited, right? So, and it's almost, to me, again, designed to keep the kids' minds in a box. One of the great books I read when I went to grad school at NYU was a book, which the name I forgot was, but it talks about this limitation of the school structure. Let me get the title of that book. Do I have it? No, I got it. It's called Engaging Minds, right? Very powerful book, which kind of exposes the education, the limitation of education as it's structured today, and what could be done. But in order for that to be done, you have to have bold and creative people to take chances, right? So I talked about bells as being limiting in structure, the lack of creativity, and also the textbooks, or in my case, English. I found that not all, but some of the texts, the classics, were limited, right? Excuse me. We didn't get to hear the voices of black authors. Yes, they're the classics. Yes, they're great works. But I think there was not a balance between European literature and African American, Caribbean literature. So, those were the things I was dealing with in my first year, and I remember one time, my first year, I never forget this. I was learning to be a teacher, and the kids were shocked because they could smell fresh blood. I was having a real difficult time, controlling, managing the kids, and one of the things I learned was that you have to learn how to teach, right? I came right out of my bachelor's degree, and I wasn't really prepared to go into the classroom. I had probably 3 days of learning how to teach. But eventually, over time with tenacity, I did persevere, and I'm here 23 years later. So those are the 3 things I kind of saw in my first year of teaching, and I'm glad I survived, and I hope this was interesting and enlightening. Peace.